Recruitment.
Thank you, Jess. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. As he mentioned, it was about the effects of land management type on American kestrel, occupancy, and recruitment. American kestrels are the smallest falcon species in North America. They're about the size of a robin, and they're often seen perching on power lines. Northland College has partnered with the U.S. Forest Service on this project, and we are looking at two distinct land management types. On the bottom, you can see a picture of our first area, which is the U.S. Forest Service, located in the Moqua Barrens in northern Wisconsin, and this is going to be our control group. On the top, you can see a picture of one of our sites in the private agricultural lands of Ashland and Bayfield counties, also in northern Wisconsin, and this will be our treatment group. A lot of projects tend to focus their efforts either on research or conservation, but this project is really unique because we are combining both of those things. We're giving the kestrels a suitable nesting habitat while also allowing us a research opportunity at the same time. And researching the kestrels is really important because their populations have been declining drastically in recent years. The Peregrine Fund is one of the world's leading raptor conservation groups, and they have recently created the American Kestrel Partnership to raise awareness about the decline. In this graph here, you can see the decline in several different areas across the U.S., with the red line showing a 47% decline in North America as a whole from 1966 to 2010. A more local decline can be seen in the blue line, showing a 63% decline, and we're seeing the most drastic changes in the kestrel populations in the northeastern U.S., in this study showing an 88% decline. And the reasons for the decline are unknown, although there are several different hypotheses as to why this is happening, which could be ranging from the West Nile virus, loss of habitat, competition with other species that share a similar niche like the Cooper's hawk, or some other factors like that. Our main question for this project was to address whether kestrels were more productive on publicly managed lands or private agricultural lands, and we came up with three hypotheses to address this question. The first one is that kestrel occupancy was going to be higher on the public U.S. Forest Service lands, and the second hypothesis is that recruitment is also going to be higher on the public lands. And our third hypothesis, this one is really interesting. So we thought that sex ratios are going to be more female biased on the public U.S. Forest Service lands. So a lot of birds are sexually dimorphic, meaning that the males and females simply look different. And in this case, the female kestrels are larger than the males, meaning that they're the more expensive sex to produce. And therefore, we thought that the sex ratios were going to be more female biased on public lands, because those birds were going to be less influenced by anthropogenic practices like farming. And a study by Grigio et al. In 2002 suggested that you are more likely to see female-biased sex ratios in environments that favor the kestrels and provide them with more resources for survival. Most of our nest boxes are made by the Wildlife Techniques class at Northland College, and then they are placed in trees about 4 meters high. And we do this by driving around and talking to private landowners, and we have not been turned down yet. The landowners have been extremely helpful and very generous, and just a great help with the project overall. Then we wait for the kestrels to migrate back north, and we assess occupancy and recruitment, and we band any of the nestlings and adults that we can. And then we clean the boxes and wait again for next year. This project began in 2015 by Dr. Tom Doolittle of the U.S. Forest Service when he placed 9 boxes up in the open grassland of the public forest land, and he thought that it would be a great idea to have some boxes on a different land management type to see which habitat the kestrels preferred. So by 2016, there were 9 boxes on private land and 21 on public land, and this is when the majority of our data was collected. By 2017 and currently, there are 20 boxes on private land and 30 on public land. And it's our goal for 2018 to have 30 boxes on each land management type. In 2015, we banded 2 new adults and 25 nestlings. And in 2016, this last summer, there were 11 new adults banded, and we even had 1 recaptured adult from the 2015 banding event. There were also 44 nestlings that were banded, And in the bottom right picture here, you can see one of the bands on the adult kestrel. They're very small and they do not affect the birds at all. So our first hypothesis that occupancy is going to be higher on public lands was supported with our data. As you can see in this graph here, we have 3 different occupant categories, either that the nest box was occupied by kestrels, a non-target species like bluebirds or European starlings, or that the nest box was empty. And looking at our combined occupancy rates, in 2015 it was 77.8%, and in 2016, 56.7%. That is much higher than the national average of only 37.7%. And I will return to that thought in the discussion. Our second hypothesis, that recruitment was going to be higher on public lands, was supported by our data, but let me explain this one a little further here. So in this graph, you can see that the U.S. Forest Service had an average maximum brood count of 4.6 eggs, where on private land we had exactly 4 eggs. And after running a statistical test, the p-value came out to be 0.02, which is significant at a 95% confidence level. But as you can see by the standard error bars, there was no deviation from the mean in the private lands, and therefore we do need a larger sample size to more accurately represent the population. But regardless, looking at our egg counts of 4.6 and 4.0, they are quite a bit lower this time than the national average of 5.12, and that is according to the Peregrine Fund in 2017. And our last hypothesis, that kestrel sex ratios are going to be more female biased on the public lands, was not supported by our data. In this graph here, you can see the U.S. Forest Service in 2015, the same land in 2016, and private land in 2016. And across all years and all study sites, we did have quite a larger proportion of females. So looking at our female percentages of 68, 61, and 71%, they are quite a bit higher than a lot of other studies that have recently occurred. One study for almost 30 years in Wisconsin reported a 51.2% female nestling sex ratio. So that's about 1-to-1, which you would expect. And another study in Canada, ending in 1990, reported only 46% females. So we are seeing a lot higher female percentage in our study for some reason. And this graph is a different way of looking at the same data. On the x-axis, you can see the percent of female nestlings, and on the y, we have the percent of nest boxes. So for example, the first bar shows that we have almost 30% of our nest boxes contain 100% females, where we had no boxes without females. And you would typically expect to see a normal distribution, favoring the boxes with about half males and half females and only a few on the far extremes. But instead, we are seeing a positive skew towards the boxes that are favoring mostly females. And moving on to the discussion, it is possible that we did see higher occupancy rates in the public U.S. Forest Service land due to the lag effect. And this means that those boxes were simply up for a longer period of time, and that could have allowed the kestrels to notice them and move into them and be more familiar with those boxes. And if you see here in these 2 pictures, the top one shows one of our sites in the agricultural land, and the bottom one is the U.S. Forest Service land. And you can see that there is quite a big difference in the land cover type. The top one, there's a lot more trees around the agricultural landscape, and this could be a reason for the difference in occupancy as well. There may be many more opportunities for the kestrels to nest in natural cavities with all of the trees, where in the U.S. Forest Service, the trees are very limited, so nesting habitat could be even more limited there, which would allow us a higher occupancy rate in the U.S. Forest Service area. And it also may be due to the fact that agricultural practices could be altering the prey abundance in the private lands, which may account for the higher occupancy in the public lands. So we did see higher occupancy and female biased sex ratios in all of our studies across all the years compared to the national average. And it's possible that our higher occupancy rate may suggest that kestrel nesting habitat is very limited locally. And the fact that we had a very skewed female biased sex ratio could mean that we are providing the kestrels with a very suitable nesting habitat. The environment may be providing them with a ton of nutrients and a ton of resources, which allows them to produce more of the more expensive sex, the females. And in contrast, our recruitment was really low compared to the national average. And this could be linked back to the fact that there were so many females being produced, the more expensive and the larger sex, so that could result in a lower amount of eggs being produced. For the future, we plan to maintain and hopefully install soon the 30 boxes on each land management type, and we will collect data for the next 2 to 3 years. We also plan to construct and install smart nest boxes, and these are nest boxes with a camera trap mounted on top, looking down into the nest to monitor nesting behavior, as well as temperature sensors inside of the boxes to monitor temperature and humidity. And there will also be sensors on the entry hole to track when the kestrels exit and return into the nest box. Lastly, we plan to assess site fidelity, which is the likelihood of a kestrel to return to the same area year after year, and site philopatry, which is the likelihood that the nestlings will return to the place in which they were born. And I would love to thank Northland College Parsonage Fund for this project and the U.S. Forest Service funding, along with every single person who has helped out with this project and made it possible, and especially the private landowners. Their support has been immense, and it made this project possible. And I would also like to thank each and every one of you guys for coming to my presentation, and I would love to take any questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, we do have a few minutes to offer some questions to Allie, if there are any.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you notice increased predation rates? Did you look at some of that at the nest boxes?
So increased predation rates on private versus public lands?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't look at that. We have such a small sample size for the first year, but that is something that we can definitely look into in the future. We did actually have one mortality in one of the nestlings when we went to clean the nest boxes. We found their remains in one of the bands after the nestling was banded. But we concluded that that was probably due to natural causes because she was the youngest nestling and she had 3 older sisters, so they probably just outcompeted her for food. But I'm not sure as far as predation. That is something that we can definitely look into in the future. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Have you ever had any bands occur if somebody had fallen to dead dolphin or anything?
We have not. We really just started this in the summer of 2015. So we did have that one kestrel that came back and was recaptured in the summer of 2016. But yeah, other than that, no, we have not had anyone reporting the dead kestrels with the bands on so far. Yeah.
Anything else for Allie?
Okay. Thank you guys so much.